Hello and welcome to Show De Vie with Mike S., the show of love, the show of life, the show of fire and air. I had the opportunity to sit down with Mike G and actually record him for the 100th episode of Show De Vie. We talk about music, we talk about booze, we talk about influences, we talk about the therapeutic process that this has all been able to give us, where Austin is going, if it's going anywhere, and emotional ways that we all seem to open up in this forum. I thank him incredibly of allowing me this opportunity to talk to him, to kind of turn the tables, as he even mentions in here, make the hunter become the hunted. So obviously I hope that you guys enjoy this session with Mike G and Austin and Jen. This is something, you bring into something that I was even thinking driving over here that I wanted to bring up. Music is definitely a common thread that goes through all of these things. You find a way to incorporate music into the conversations. Music is a very big part of your life. So why don't you tell us give us sort of the soup to nuts, like how you got so into it, where it started, where it brought you, because right now, your life in terms of the way that you make money doesn't have to do with music anymore. So and then why did you go into that? Why'd you go in that direction?
So my mom was, when it comes to culture and it comes to music or it comes to film or any of that stuff, like that all comes from my mom, and this is a roundabout way of answering the question, but growing up with her is a different kind of thing. And she was always playing piano. She'd been playing piano since she was a kid. Her mom made her play piano. So I think it was 88 or 89. She said, Mike, well, she'll call me Michael, but you're going to take piano lessons. I'm like, I don't want to take piano lessons. She's like, you're going to take piano lessons. And I did. And I was kicking and screaming, but basically those lessons with Mr. Real, which I'm sure he's passed by now. He had one of the most elegant hair pieces I've ever seen. And a man had the worst breath of anybody that I can recall. And he would sit there and we'd meet, I think, every Saturday or something like that. And so we'd go through and he'd say, this is bass clef, this is treble clef. Do your thing. And then I would learn the classics, like an abridged version of the classics, like Chopin or Tchaikovsky or a lot of Liszt, right? So anyway, I started to do this, and then lo and behold, school at that point at least was really, because I was taking band and stuff, right? So it's like I'm doing piano, and then I'm thinking, well, I want to get involved with band. It's a good reason to be social or good.
And you were how old in 89?
I was 9. Okay. 9 years old. Yeah, it's easy because I can add it to 80 and 80s.
And in that, being 9 years old and being in these things or whatever like that, like, was it socially accepted at your school and forever to be the kid that took piano? And like, I mean, I take it, did you not play? I mean, did you play football? Did you play any sports or anything that you went into this artistic thing? Right. Was that, that time and place? I mean, the 80s and being a kid and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes people make fun of you for that stuff.
Yeah, well, I moved around all the time. So I was in Arizona at the time, and we moved at third grade. So I went to a new elementary school, the new kid in third grade, and I think that was roughly around the time that I started doing piano. And, shortly thereafter, my mom got me an alto sax. I was at least trying to do something social with other people, but still, the only constant when you're moving around is yourself.
Sure.
So you don't rely on other people, and you certainly don't develop a good muscle to assimilate, I suppose you could say, right? And so I wasn't really social, I could talk to people, but like me playing in a band or not made no difference.
You didn't have a clique at any of these
No,
places.
there's no way. I didn't have enough time. These kids had went to school for probably 3 years together, 4 years together. Right. So they have all this rapport, and I kind of come into it. And so I'm finding myself having more in common with the teachers because I could talk to them, and I have to adapt. And so socially, I think that those things got moving forward a little bit more quickly than some of the other kids. So music was just this thing. And I took to it and I liked it. It connected me to things that showed up because music is in a lot of movies a huge backdrop, right? So it was just connected.
What music were you listening to at that time?
Oh, when I was 9. My mom had a pretty big vinyl collection, and I would go dip into it from time to time. And I would say, a little bit later, she had a lot of Phil Collins on vinyl, which was great. I love Phil Collins. She had Yes on vinyl. She had the Beatles on vinyl, which I never cared for until like my mid-20s. But the one tape that I can remember that she had that I was always listening to was Queen. So News of the World. And to illustrate...
So very poppy upbringing.
Oh, dude, totally poppy.
Yeah.
And classical.
Not a Van Halen, Metallica, Iron Maiden, any of those
no
kind
metal.
of things.
Yeah, I discovered that in my teens. My mom, she got kind of edgy sometimes. So, she was a big Roxy Music fan. And that was kind of cool, even though I didn't know in the late 80s. Brian Ferry, just a weird looking dude, but their music with Brian Eno, it was really cool. So there was some cool stuff. I mean, she grew up in San Francisco, so she had some finger on the pulse of music and all that. But I don't know, it wasn't that cool. And all I can tell you is that I liked Queen so much that I ran that tape dry, man. News of the World. And I remember specifically one time I was I think it was in Arizona. I was in my banana chair, right, and I'm singing along to Queen, full lungs. My door's closed and no one's home, and my dad comes in and I'm singing Queen, which some of those songs are Get Down, Make Love as a 9 or 10-year-old.
Sure,
it's a tad inappropriate,
Sure.
And he looks at me and he's kind of what the fuck did I walk in? And he walks back out.
Right.
So that was the thing that could help me feel social and feel connected to this bigger thing,
Cool.
Yeah, that's good.
So you started out with piano, you learned some classics, you're starting to get into music, to understand what it means. I guess were you a big MTV person? Did you get wrapped up in the pop culture of the top 40 and things like that?
Right.
I mean, you're talking about some stuff being a 9-year-old listening to Queen in 1989 is definitely, it's indie.
Yeah, I suppose,
doing that
right?
kind of stuff.
Well,
So,
Freddie Mercury was still alive too, so they were still putting out music.
But your friends weren't jamming to Queen also.
I don't know. The only people at that time, even within the first couple of years I can remember of living in Arizona, I don't remember anybody really being into certain kinds of music. I remember they would be into certain kinds of Nintendo games or certain TV shows, but I felt kind of out on my own thing. And classical was safe because I wouldn't have to ask I gotta be honest, my dad doesn't really he doesn't have the best musical taste,
Sure.
We like some of the same stuff, and Neil Diamond was something that later we bonded over, but that was all for me, and I played it safe with classical stuff, and then it got poppy. And I think the moment where I started actually diving into pop, and this is probably, I don't know what year En Vogue was out, because it's Nirvana and En Vogue.
Oh yeah, En Vogue was 93, 4.
Yeah, a little bit later, right? So they kind of
8th grade for me, which I guess would have been 92.
Yeah, so we we're probably moving ahead just a little bit, but that breakdown part, the acapella breakdown part,
never gonna get it, never gonna get it.
No. That was, to me, I recorded it off the radio and I listened to that part so many times because I said, in essence, this is one of the most amazing a cappella pieces I've ever heard. And somehow that appealed to the classical senses. And I just remember that piece. And then, so I was listening to that, and Sir Mix-a-Lot was on, Joe De Vie, Belle Biv DeVoe. But it didn't mean anything to me. I was listening to it too because it was interesting, but it didn't make me feel anything.
Sure.
And then Nevermind came out, and I got a tape from a friend. And we're talking about Salt Lake now, but that was it. That changed my whole sense of melody. I learned how to write songs on guitar
was Nevermind the most life-changing album that you have gotten?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because not only did it show me that with just power chords you can write any song you want, because tonally it's flat, really short, but you can write a song with that. Every goddamn Nirvana song is basically just power chords.
Sure.
But the thing that it really did is I brought it home and I listened to it. I'm like, man, this is really heavy and this is really loud. And he's screaming. I love it because I heard Lithium one late night in Arizona. I'm like, holy shit, what is this, right? But anyway, so I got a tape and I'm like, all right, Mom, listen to this because I need to know that this is okay because I'm going to pursue this kind of music. I'm going to really, really dive into this more. Right. And she liked it. She's like, it sounds British. I'm like, okay. I still don't know how she heard that.
Right.
But that opened it. And then from that point, I was buying tapes and buying CDs, and obviously the fucking grunge thing was happening at exactly the right time for me, going through puberty and, Soundgarden building these kind of like post-apocalyptic worlds with lyrics and just blowing my mind intellectually. But that was it. That was that moment. That tape I can still listen to Nevermind, side 2 preferably, and it's a pop masterpiece.
Sure.
And I actually got to talk to Butch Vig about it.
But for the record, you don't like the Sturgill Simpson version of In
Bloom? It's fucking... Just because you can write, it's not fun. There's nothing about it to me. There's nothing about it that's fun to me. It is... He shifts the chord progression to match something tonally that doesn't even match the other song. It didn't need to be done, and I felt like it's just kind of passe. Okay. I don't like it.
Yeah, because when I was sitting in my car and having a shitball day, and that song came on, the first thing that I noticed was the chord progression. Yeah,
it's kind of like it's like the Nixon song, right? So we can look at it now and be like, oh, that was a good song, even though if we looked at it further, we'd be like, that was a shit song. Right. But that little spark of nostalgia that it causes, that's the only reason that song works. It's not good songwriting. It's nothing about... Anyway.
That's why people like stuff like the Presidents of the United States of America and shit like that. Like, they're terrible.
It is.
But people listen to Peaches, and it reminds you of like being in a back of a car in, the 90s.
And that guitar tone is pretty cool, though, man. Like, from a production standpoint, it was kind of interesting stuff. But
so all of this learning, you do that, then you were in a band. You made your money off of music at one point.
Well, I made some money off of music. Well,
I mean, was it your sole career at one point?
No, it never was.
Okay.
Because, you can't make money being in a quote-unquote emo band. Right. And you certainly can't make money in a band that doesn't know how to write 3-minute songs and has to write 8-minute songs. That was me being over adult. Like, that wasn't in the cards. There were a couple opportunities later on that probably could have turned into that. But
what was the name of the band?
Oh, man, by the time that, it became something where we were kind of selling out shows and things, that was Clap Clap, and that was like 2005, 2006.
And what was the genre? What were your inspirations?
Well, I came in as a hired gun. It was basically I met Josh at Texas State. We had German class together, and it was a really popular band in Austin because it was like Clap Your Hands and Say Yeah. As odd as it is, the names are very similar, but the tone... Like LCD Sound System, like Hot Chip, if it was all instruments instead of synths and stuff. And they were doing really well, but there were like 12 fucking people in the band. Right. So they're playing shows and they can't even fit on stage. And I was like...
So they did rap shows.
Yeah, I was basically like that. Like, there's a section of clappers, and we're talking like 4 people dedicated to just clapping. It's like, this isn't feasible. So I said, hey, I'd like to learn how to record music more. And this is when I got Pro Tools, early 2000s or 2004, 2005. 2004, I think, specifically. I'm like, let me record your record. So I did that, and I did a remix for them, and then ultimately ended up joining the band. I'm like, okay, Josh, we need to fire like half of these people. Right. We can't be a good band if there are all these other people. And and so anyway, so that was a really cool moment, being in San Marcos and doing that band, and then selling out emos. Right. Inside, which is the apex of my musical career. And what year was this? This is 2000, probably 5 or 6. Probably 5.
I wasn't in Austin then, so I wouldn't have seen you. So
yeah, it was a cool time for sure. Yeah. And we, instead of taking it forward, we decided to break up because I had already started building a career in tech. And in 2004.
So your career in tech was going on at that time in 2006?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was your day job.
Yeah,
which you still have now?
Yeah, 13 years.
And then, but you've, as we're sitting in this room with all this nice equipment, you went on to produce things too.
Yo, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Like, I loved
concurrently?
Music. Yeah, I was doing everything like all at one time.
Have you ever produced anything that we would know?
Yeah, The Sword. Right. You heard of this? So I did Brian, I'd known for a long time. He was an old school part of that scene. We were playing together, and he is a great producer. He's like, hey, can you do the vocals? The first one, Age of Winners. Yeah. And all I can, the best part about this is that what I would tell you is that, so JD would come in and record in my closet, and I do all the edits and stuff, and I actually get paid for those. It was mind-boggling idea that I record and get paid for it. But the rest of the band that was there, like, dude, we want to be in here and listen, but Lost is on, so they'd all go
Right.
like, watch Lost in the living room,
Right.
and I've still never seen Lost. The closest I've ever been to it is them watching it in the living room while we're tracking vocals. But anyway, so yeah, probably 10 records total, maybe a few more, and then a few of my own, and I've made money producing on some of them, and some of it's just for me. So just
and
kinda
then
building it up.
Again, the tech thing, a constant, still in there
since 2004.
Then you at one point stopped making money off of music.
Yeah, I stopped producing records. It took a lot of time.
Did you then go straight into the gin pursuit? So we're going to switch from music right now,
right?
And then now we're going to go into alcohol. Do we want to go to our next offering here?
Yeah, let's I don't know how much Tobal you have left. But
I have 0 left.
Oh shit! All right, here.
You don't have to shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're pouring us what now?
Yeah, that's good. So this is, I talk about Vago a lot. I love Judah, Houston at the time, Francisco, Aquilina. This is a Coyote on barrel. Very, very seldom do I see this. And I'm sure Billy's got one, but I actually not seen it behind his bar. But this is
I don't think so.
Only about 511 liters. This is in clay, twice in clay. And Coyote, I think, is a version of agave Americana. So similar to the plants we see around town here. And this is at 52.6.
Interesting connection. When I was at Institute tasting this, Judah popped in.
Oh, really?
Just popped in off the street. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? So, yeah, it just, they hung out for a little while. And
yeah, Judah's a great guy.
So I guess now... So we're going to probably go back to certain things. I wanted to talk about...
This is your first time interviewing me, Mike.
Yeah, of course.
I'll give you as much flexibility.
So wanted to, so we talked a little bit about the inception of music in your mind and how that ended up growing.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about alcohol.
Well, alcohol. I'm not sure why anybody gets into the alcohol industry. I guess I understand.
Me neither.
Yeah, dude, Now, on the production side, too, I don't really understand. Because the kinds of things that you have to do, obviously regulatorily, if that's the word, at a federal layer and then a state layer, it's a lot. But ultimately,
Cheers. CG Bale.
It's got this weird footy funk to this one. It's really weird. It's green, but sorry, I'm just sipping this guy.
Footy
it's
funk.
almost like meaty to it, It smells like kind of like ramen to me right now.
But I guess even before that, like I do want to talk about this stuff about, the actual business. But where did your passion for booze that led to you being, I guess, an enthusiast,
right?
That led to you ultimately wanting to create something that led to you wanting to make money off that creation.
Yeah.
How did that start out? Did you have a drinking family? Did you have, were your parents?
That's interesting, right? So briefly, my parents, our family started really in '88. That's when my parents got married. So my mom was a single mom, and people that know me know that I've never met my father, and so
right.
Yeah, and so she followed my dad, who is my dad,
right.
And that's how we ended up in all these different places. So that being said, my mom stopped drinking, I think a couple years after she had me. I think she was 34 or 5. I think that's right. I'll have to ask her for sure. But so her parents were alcoholics, man. And
did she have a problem with it, and that's why she stopped?
No, she
sort of a preventative measure.
That's right. Yeah, because her sister had been an alcoholic and abusing pills, and then her other sister died of alcoholism at a young age as a result of diabetes and drinking. And then her parents, even though they were alcoholics, they still made it into their 80s,
right?
And it was a different time. She grew up
functioning alcoholism went through all the 50s and 60s and 70s and everything.
Totally.
Sure. People were. We've seen Mad Men.
Yeah,
people
exactly.
Were going to work that way.
And so that was the thing is, so my dad didn't really have a history in it, right? Like he loved margaritas, but I never seen him sip whiskey ever. He'd have some beers every now and again, but it was not a big component of the narrative. Food was more. So ultimately, like, it was this culmination of growing up in such a rich culinary background. Now, my dad, he's in the restaurant industry. He's been fucking doing this kind of stuff for a long time. He's owned his own place. He'd always cook dinners on Sunday. My mom would cook kind of the rest of the time. And he was so great at it. He just knew flavors. It was really, really good. And so same thing with my mom, but she would do the esoteric stuff. You know, I remember her making borscht. I was like, why are you?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so she'd make that. She'd make curries. She'd make lavender, cucumber, salad, Thai noodle set, like all this different kinds of stuff. So it was really eye-opening for as a kid that this kind of stuff would happen. So anyway, I always was open to food. Never a finicky eater. My brother, he's exactly the opposite. He's very, very picky about what he eats. So let's look at like how this stuff kind of lines up. So I'm raised in music, movies, very rich culture of food and the arts. And I have my dad weighing heavy as an influence on me to be in the professional world successful. So if you think about what the perfect intersection is of using your background in culinary living and culture and then business, I mean, in a sense, I'm surprised I didn't open a restaurant. I just was never much of a cook. I can cook. But so that was the thing. And so, you know, Charles, and he and I had been friends for a long time. And I wrapped grad school at St. Ed's, and I can't remember the year now, probably 2010, something like that. Same thing with him a couple months after. And so we both got out of there and we're like, dude, we can do this stuff. Like, we know how to write a business plan. We know how to understand a P&L.
But did that spark to want to ultimately create something? Because, you know, and talk about with Jessica and I, like, you know, going into the bar industry and stuff, is we started getting this taste for not hospitality, nicer things. We were living in New York, going out to these places. You know, we wanted to show, we really enjoyed the experience of being out, and we wanted to share that with somebody. Yeah. But we were definitely, you know, it's funny when you talk about, you know, being raised in this situation, like I feel like my affinity for like having sort of open palate also personally, I ate everything, whatever. Yeah, my parents don't. They're super picky about stuff. Yeah. Like I'm like, where did I come from? Because like they eat white bread and mayonnaise and stuff. You know, in terms of drinking, my parents were drinkers all growing up or whatever, but it was, you know, Budweiser and Crown and Soda, like that kind of stuff. So I sort of ventured out to do that. I got a path that I, you know, started going out and seeing these things, and then that came from that. Before you decided to ultimately start creating something, were you going out to bars a lot? Did you start getting into gin? Did you start thinking that was interesting? Like, where did that fire start burning?
Right, for sure. So there was a particular memory, Eastside Showroom, and then we were just, actually before we were recording, talking about Adam Bryan, right? And
yes.
I never ran into him then. I ran into the kind of second wave. And I remember I was there one night. And
the Congress wave.
He had moved. Yeah, he'd moved to Congress already. And I was not going over there. I didn't even know about it. You know, I'm not even sure what year we're talking, probably like 2000.
Oh, this is 2010, 11.
10 or 11, yeah. And I'd been going through, I think at that point I was going through divorce too. So.
Right.
But, you know, Charles and I would go out, and we went from like vodka sodas, you know, to saying, let's go explore a little bit. And gin was this thing, I didn't understand it. It was kind of enigmatic, and all I knew is that I loved Plymouth. I bought a bottle of it on a whim.
Love Plymouth.
Okay. It's like my favorite, one of my favorite gins, if not my favorite. And I was like, I like this and tonic, man. This is really good. I don't know why. It was just rich. It had this kind of interesting array of flavors and stuff. But anyway, so I knew a bit about gin. Or rather, I knew a bit about Plymouth gin. I didn't know shit about distillation, fermentation, any of that stuff. But I remember Brian Dressel was working at Eastside Showroom, which I didn't know him then. What more visually identifiable dude is there? You know, like red hair, tall, glasses.
Oh, and especially when he starts talking.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, if you haven't heard Antonio's impression of Brian Dressel, you haven't lived. It's fucking spot on. It's ridiculous. Amazing. It's ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
If I closed my eyes, Brian would be in the room.
Maybe I'll get Interior to come over
and just do an interview with Brian. Perfect. Yeah. No, that would be amazing. Like you should do 2 interviews and see if somebody can pick out which one is the right one.
And he can just wing all the details. Like, I don't care. I just
nobody fucking knows.
Yeah, but so I was talking to him about gin, and he's actually the one that brought it up. I was having some cocktail, and he's like, "Have you tried this gin?" I'm like, "I haven't tried many gins, so no, I hadn't." You know, I remember down in some Tanqueray years prior, and it was not very pleasant. Now I quite enjoy it, and he said, "All right, well, I'm going to give you some taste of a few different gins," and so I just started tasting. You know, I was like, this is pretty interesting. You know, I know vodka, just the connotation of vodka, even at that point, not even from a flavor perspective, but the kinds of people that were like shooting vodka and vodka this, vodka that culture, that party culture was already starting to build. And I like inherently just rally against that.
Sure.
You know, I'm not a party dude.
Well, and it's interesting you say that too, because I think gin, for me personally, also was a very big turning point, because I was under the impression for a long... I didn't think that gins differentiated. I didn't know
it's a good
at
point.
the time when I first started that Tanqueray and Bombay and Plymouth all tasted different. And the first time that I actually realized that was when we came here and we did David Allen's Tipsy Tech class.
Yeah.
And he did a bunch next to each other. And having those tastings, like when I tasted Bombay Dry, I was like, this is perfect for a gin and tonic. Like it tastes like a gin and tonic, and it's just the gin.
Right.
When I tasted Plymouth with this little salinity that's in it or whatever, I was like, this is for a martini. And it blew my mind that, because I thought at the time, vodka was vodka, which was flavorless, and gin was just flavored vodka. I mean, that was the idea that I had in my head. So that was a very big turn. When I started seeing that like a spirit that seemed so consistent across its category could be different, I started getting excited about going and trying other things.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
Sure.
And you know, years later now, there's a lot of shitty gins, and there's a lot of gins that people make when they don't care.
Sure.
You know, it's like, well, let's have more products on the shelf. Like, fuck you, man. That's really ridiculous. So just think of it like this, right? So the reason we do gin is because it was harder. It really is.
You really wanted to challenge yourself.
Yeah, that's totally right. And that's how...
Was there any sort of feeling of, I can do this better, or I can do this also?
You know, better is so arbitrary. It's hard to say. I just knew that we were going to do it unlike everybody else. Better or not. And obviously... genius conceptually, the whole process, and it's basically what a normal company would do years after having already operated. We built a bottle from scratch. You know, we built molds and shit. I mean, this is stuff that like Patron does. Local guys don't do this. You know, we learned a lot of things, and we learned how to ferment and all of that. And then you learn your lessons, and you realize like that was more for us than it probably was for other people, you know? And that's the biggest lesson if you talk about like the latest chapter, although, you know, we'll jump around, but it's the absence of my ego and Charles's and I's egos. That's what our products are now. We try to serve people, not ourselves, you know?
Well, and you did very much the reverse thing. Like I always use sort of the example of like Real Ale.
Yeah.
Real Ale built the house on Fireman's Fore. They built a very accessible beer that people went nuts over. And then they started going into doing Devil's Backbone and coffee porters and all that kind of stuff. You did the opposite of that.
I don't know why.
When you had the gin, you had the Navy Strength, and we talked about Navy Strength, you know, in the bar one time, reformulated a little bit, decided to go only Navy Strength, which was a big diversion from what seemed like the normal path.
Right.
Did your Satol, you know, had that small little deal. And then finally you've come into the moneymaker. Now you're at Highborn, which is the thing that's going to make you the money. And then, like, how did you go through that thought process? I know that you were talking to John Garrett about it and all this kind of stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, at what point did you sort of like, and tell me if I'm wrong, want to stop being the starving artist?
That's a good analogy for it, really. You know, the Sotol piece, because that was happening prior to the Highborn thing, and like for people that care about Sotol or whatever, like we did something that no one else had ever done.
Sure.
And we were the first to the moon. It was a space race for us, and we did it. And it was the most passion I've had in my getting my hands dirty in probably anything, even more than the gin, of which I've started those first ferments in my fucking shed, right? Like, and then I would take them to the distillery, and it would slosh around in my back seat. I remember that at any moment. I'm like, if I brake too hard, I'm spilling about 30 gallons of liquid in the back of my car. At any rate, it was time to do something very practical.
Right.
And John had been transitioning or had already transitioned to a new distributor of which he had a lot of say. He had a position of power. And I've always liked John. I met John through Bill Norris, and John was, when we were looking for distributors for Genius, he was one of the first people I talked to. And, you know, in hindsight, we ended up back with him anyway, so it didn't matter. But basically I was like, well, how are we smart here? How can I give you the tools you need? Because John, you and Matt and Kale at this point, like, you guys know the market. You're there. Your fingers are to the pulse. Now, I may know social trends, right? 'Cause it's a little bit more removed, but when it comes to what moves or what sells, you guys know. What hold do you have? And he's like, well, no one's doing the well gin game. I said, okay, perfect. Now I've got a problem statement, right?
Right.
And we went back. I said, what size does it need to be? Liter. Okay, I'll find the bottle that I like for it. What does the flavor profile need to be like? Okay, like this. Cool. And so we went through 8 iterations only, actually, much like Tequila Ocho. And then we nailed it. And that was with participation from other bartenders and getting their feedback and stuff. But basically it was like, let's make something inexpensive and let's win the well. Let's make something for you guys.
Well, in a true question, were you losing money before that?
Oh, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I guess did you ever have that sort of like, I mean, I always talk about with bars, there's this time that you're sitting there in your bar where you have to make a real decision that your bar is going to very much go differently than what you originally intended to.
Oh, right.
It doesn't, you talk about musicians and stuff like that. You don't have to necessarily sell out, but you got to get a fucking song on the radio or you're not going to, or it's just a passion project and like you just spent money to do that kind of thing. Did you have a time when you were talking about this highborn thing? Like, did you and Charles have to really sit down and go, do we want to do this? Because before you decide to do that, it's like, we're kind of going to ultimately run this thing into the ground.
Yeah. But Charles and I creatively have really always been locked. I trust him in the operational capacity and he trusts me in that creative and kind of marketing capacity. So in terms of him, like he's like, I'm all for it, if you think it's going to do that. But I'll tell you what, and whether I think it's funny because, Lydia is amazing and she's my best friend and all of that. And I told her initially that we were thinking about doing it. And she's like, yeah, but that's like against everything you stand for. I'm like, but is it,
No, not necessarily.
I like making gin.
Sure.
Right? It's an interesting equation. And it's not that difficult, frankly. Once you get some of the theorems out of the way, the things that are always going to be true, it's really not that difficult. And she's like, you shouldn't do it. People are going to be upset. I'm like, I don't think they're going to be upset. I think they're going to like it. And that was funny.
Especially, I think you can think about it the complete opposite of that. I was so anxious to look for it because you already had built credibility.
Yeah.
It wasn't just bringing you're just peddling this cheap gin or whatever like that. You had already gotten a credibility for being someone who took quality very important. And now you're just going to make it more affordable for me and make it something that can fit in my well. Fuck yeah. We were very anxious to,
Do you, let me ask you a question because I think about that sometimes because I think about it like, man, now that we're selling a good amount of this, more than anything else that we've ever sold, like going back, why didn't we do this the first place? And so I guess I think like from your perspective, because you've known me through this whole journey, we had our release party at Drinkwell, for God's sakes. Had we done this the very first thing, would it have had the same kind of resonance? Not knowing us?
That's an extremely good question because that's a very good question because, if you had been somebody that came in at the time that you came to us with the first Genius Gin. Yeah. Our well gin was Citadel.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was cheap and it worked.
Sure.
This was before...
Fords wasn't out yet.
Fords was out and all those kind of things. Jason came in with a built-in credibility, automatically. You didn't have it. You came in off the street. I remember sitting at the big table, like having the taste of the first gin, and we definitely liked it. But it didn't make sense to put in the well, so we put it up on the back bar, and then it's just something that we end up, doing whatever. But we knew that credibility. But I'll be honest, I'll tell you this: I think, and not saying anything that you didn't have the credibility of the actual product because you made a good product.
Right.
We were anxious and I say I was anxious. I don't know if Jessica would share the sentiment or whatever, to work with that because you would build up a personal credibility as someone who put quality into that because of how much we got to know you.
Yeah.
So if we had maybe gotten to know you that much before and then you ended up releasing the gin, maybe it would have been like that. But our friendship and us knowing you, I was anxious to get into Highborn because Genius was originally something that we could only sell so much of.
Right. Sure,
when you went to the Navy strength, that was even a farther departure.
Right.
So we wanted to partner as much as we could. I really had wanted to work with you for a long time, and then when this happened, it's like, great, this is the perfect opportunity. Just please don't let it suck.
Yeah. No, Ryan, we can't let it suck, and it's been good. And if you think about it, it's really no different than you start out writing concept records. It's really the inverse of what I think most of the time works, but I don't know, man. I suspect that had we done it first, it wouldn't have resonated the same way. John and I wouldn't have had the same kind of relationship. No. I mean, we put Genius, the Navy Strength, the Oak, the Sotol all up on the board first. Right. And then by the time Highborn's come out, I think it was a no-brainer for everybody, you know? And I don't even take... I'm just appreciative that people trust Charles and I.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
That's a really big deal.
So now you are paying the bills,
doing
good in that.
Definitely.
You got married not long ago.
Yeah.
Which was last April?
April. She can kill me, but whatever that first Saturday was in April, either the second or the third, I can't remember.
Right. And again, I say certain things and we go back before.
No, sure.
You've been married before.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, an interesting thing about me, and, you know, people that are really close to me know this, but other people don't. And for a long time, believe it or not, so I moved to San Marcos because of a high school sweetheart, right?
And you went to high school where?
I went to high school in Katy, Texas. Okay. I graduated in 98. I was only there a year and a half. I had to move from what was a really, really stable and amazing place socially and academically in Salt Lake. Midway through junior year, my dad got a new job. And so we moved. It was very tough. That was the toughest one, man. I was probably 16, 17. So I come into Katy, and Katie's like, you guys are fucking slow here. the school system in Salt Lake is a wonderful thing. So anyway, so senior year comes around. I meet some girl in September, I think, and turns out she was the first love, and I can't even remember most of that relationship just because it just had to happen. A lot of firsts there. And instead of, because I was still in Houston, my parents are like, hey, we're moving up to Dallas. Dad's got another job. You can come live with us, don't have to pay for anything, or you can stay here and you're on your own. And I said, well, I'm going to follow the girl. That's what you do. That's a very, like I've mentioned in many interviews, it's a very common thread in our paths, you know. So I did that, went to Texas State.
And that was right after high school? Or did you like leave in part on?
No,
so you graduated there.
Yeah. I stayed
But you kept in touch regardless, and then you followed her to San Marcos?
Well, no,
so trying to figure out the timeline.
Yeah, sure. So this was wrapping up my second year at Houston Community College.
Okay.
I'd finished 2 years after. I went right into community college after high school. And so I had 2 years. And I was playing in bands, and it was cool, and I didn't know who I was. I had a shitty goatee, like all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Choker necklace, whatever, right? And there's some pictures of me that we have done. So anyway, but I had this relationship. Like, this is the thing. We talked about marriage, but we didn't fucking know.
Sure.
So anyway, suffice it to say, so that happened, and then we moved to San Marcos together. We lived together for merely like maybe a month or something like that, and then I get my own place. Dissolves within 2 months, and then I'm left, no social circle or anything, left again to rebuild. And that was the best possible thing that happened. I had been working at Best Buy in Houston, and then Best Buy, I transferred here to Austin, met a lot of people that I worked with, met a lot of customers. And at any rate, I was like, all right, now it's time for career. Okay. I'm wrapping up college, my undergrad at Southwest, the second or first semester at Texas State anyway. So get the undergrad. I'm like, all right, I'm totally going to go, you know, after 6 years of doing it, I graduated in 2004 and then started looking at jobs. And that's when I kind of got the job that I had now. So anyway, I was like, I'm going to just do this. This is the thing I'm going to do. So I didn't date. Like, I guess Lydia finds it really hard to believe. Like, I dated maybe 2 or 3 people from the span of when I was 22 to 26 and 27. Only a few, and just for a few months, you know? But it was because I was so focused on me. I started working out. I started eating healthily, and I started really changing the way I looked at myself. And
did you have a problem with that before? Were you eating like shit and drinking too much before that? Like, did you have a need for a change?
A need for a change mentally, but it wasn't like I was fat or anything.
Right.
But I was eating like shit. I didn't know how to eat, and I wasn't drinking. I was ardently against drinking until I was probably 20, 22. You know, that whole straight edge movement in Salt Lake, I really aligned with that.
Sure.
No smoking.
Well, and
no
especially
drugs.
with your family history and all that kind of stuff, it made sense.
Dude, if I wouldn't be surprised if for some reason me starting a distillery is somehow sublimation of my repression as a kid from my mom being so against it. And I think she's probably still a little bit uncomfortable about it. But anyway, so to the first marriage part, ultimately what happened is I think it was my father. I couldn't make it for some weekend. There was some kind of an event that I was too busy for. Now I'm actually too busy, but then I had time. But I was like, oh, I can't make it. And my dad's like, that's really selfish of you. And I took that to heart. When he says stuff, the few times that he has said kind of a very declarative statement like that, my life has kind of changed. First, he said, you're on your own. Okay. So I learned to be on my own. He said, in college, you can't do psychology because it's not going to you can do it, but you're not going to make a living at it. I'm like, okay. So then I got my business admin degree. So anyway, these almost like commandments,
Sure.
And so he said that, and then I was like, well, fuck. Maybe I am really self-centered and very, very selfish. And so I met this girl who was in town from Vegas, of all things. And she called me over to the bar. The rest was history. She still lived in Vegas, going back and forth, long-distance relationship. And she couldn't handle the commitment and cheated on me during some kind of Christmas break or whatnot. And then I said, all right, well, you know what? I've told myself in the past, like, fuck this. If anybody did that to me, done. We're done. But I was like, is that me being selfish? So then I said, all right, well, you're moving here. So she moved to Austin. And as she says, she wasn't going to move to Austin for a boyfriend. So basically the timer had started and I had to basically propose. And me rallying against that concept of being self-centered and selfish every day, I was like, well, shit, I have to get married, right? That's what a man would do. So we do it, married 9 months, get divorced, no kids, no property. And then she moved.
So much of this is fascinating because, as you started telling the story, I'm first thinking that you were going to marry the high school sweetheart.
Yeah, no.
that was just completely set up.
Yeah, no, right.
Like that just set the tone.
Right.
Or that's, the interior girlfriend.
Right.
That sounded gross. But then you go into a situation as a reaction to something that your father said, and make on paper a dumb decision, because I had somebody that worked for me at one point that already did a no call no show on the first day,
right?
And I called them and they gave me this bullshit excuse or whatever that, and I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and then we ultimately ended up firing him anyway. She cheated on you in the beginning.
Right.
The signs are as big as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
Right.
You do it anyway. As, would you call it a sense of rebellion?
Rebellion's not. I don't think
rebellion might not be the right word. But
I think as
reaction to that statement.
Yeah,
you wanted to prove him wrong. Maybe.
That's probably yeah. I think when it comes down to
which is rebellion in a way,
in a sense. Yeah. Maybe so.
And then 9 months. Like, how did it? Was it just shitty? Was it shitty from the beginning? Did you have a honeymoon period of like 4 months, and then it's like, fuck, what am I doing here?
Right. Any relationship that starts off as long distance, you have an implicit honeymoon period.
Right.
Because, I don't see you all the time.
the heart grow fonder.
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. So when it got real, it was still fine, I guess. There were obviously some issues, and I say this about any relationship ever now, if anybody's getting married or I talk to my friends about their loved ones or whatever. It's like, if you meet someone who's not willing to compromise with you, you're done. You've painted yourself in a corner, and that was it. It's like, if you're not willing to compromise on this, and I'm seeing kind of constant,
it breeds resentment, it breeds contempt.
It totally does. And it wasn't, I knew it wasn't the right thing to do.
Right.
And I did it anyway.
Sure.
To just prove that I was a good man.
Did you go through a time knowing that it was the wrong thing to do, that you were like, but by God, I'm going to make this work?
I try to be as pragmatic and collaborative as possible. So yeah, I'll give anything a reasonable effort.
Sure.
But when it's fundamentally toxic,
right?
That it's just a matter of time till it falls apart. You can only try to extend it as long as you can with diplomatic stuff, right?
So you break up after 9 months. That was what year?
Oh, I think we're talking 2011. Fall.
2011, okay.
Fall of 11, I think the divorce finally was finalized.
Okay. So that, I assume you have absolutely no contact anymore.
A little.
Oh, really?
A little. And Lydia's met her, which is, I think, good.
Was it an amicable divorce at the end of 9 months?
I don't know. I'll tell you the a little bit of the fallout. You tell me if this seems amicable to you. So we were living in this house. It was a massive house, at least. So I had my own space and basically roommates at that point, living in different rooms and things. And she kind of like immediately started dating somebody. So she was gone every night anyway. So it was just a very weird, dark air lingering in that house, you know. And I suppose it was amicable. Well, it's fine now.
I used to say that about New York. I was like, I'm not going to live with anybody in New York because half the time you're sharing a futon in a fucking studio.
Right.
So if you break up, like
Dude,
now,
right.
you're still, and you're not getting out of that lease because it's too, expensive to go do it. So
very strange time, good time, bad time, all of that. But it had to happen.
Did you initiate the divorce?
Yeah, I called it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
Was she surprised?
I think I'm pretty sure she thought that by her being, I would say, what's the word, obstinate and kind of stubborn about it, that would make me cave.
Right.
Again, going back to the compromise thing.
Right.
But I don't work like that.
Sure.
You can't just cross your arms and stalemate me. Like that doesn't, I don't work with that. I'm about warmth and, again, collaboration. And so if we can reach a better understanding with each other, working together. Yeah.
Do you need closure in arguments no matter what?
Like
even with Lydia now?
I've gotten less about closure. Time, breathing room is very important, as I've learned. But too much can seem like you're fleeing, or rather fleeing the argument. So I think it's a matter of both. Don't get too close to the fire. Because like Lydia is a fire sign, and I'm an air sign. So what happens to fire when you add air to it?
Right.
It's just it burns brighter and larger. Right. So you gotta but also can put out a fire. So it's an interesting, delicate balance there. Talking about now. But.
And with fire, let's go on to what you got here next.
So what's the next? Third one is.
Well, we're getting to the real fire on the fourth one, but we'll do this one now.
Oh yeah, I get this pintas. So I want to talk about Francisco for a second, if that's okay.
Okay.
So
you had me on an idea that I want to go back and ask this, but we're talking specifically about this mezcal, please talk about Francisco. Friend to all of us. I've listened to his podcast that you had. Incredibly intelligent guy.
Yeah. I love that guy.
But
we did. I
met him very opinionated.
Yeah. But, like when we met, I'm like, this dude, he's rubbing me the wrong way.
Well, when I first met him, he was at Fino. It was when Jessica and I were making so much of an effort, and David Allen were making so much of an effort to promote the USBG. He wasn't really that into that. Was very vocally against it and all that kind of stuff. So I really just thought he was a dick. Like, I'm like, this guy's kind of a dick. But then I would, let that part go. Went out and started going to Fino at times and talked to him a little bit more, but I actually got to know him better because I had become friends with Rachel. Rachel brought him around a few times, and I really liked Rachel. I met her originally at Virtuoso, when she was working at Virtuoso, and just took a shine to her. She was a fun girl. And
she's ultra cool.
Had a good time. Yeah, totally. She was from the Northeast. I had moved back to the Northeast not too long ago. So we had some of that stuff in common to talk about. And then she would bring him around, and then I got to know him better, and now I consider him a friend. Sure.
Yeah, again, what started probably as something very tense between or tension's probably too strong of a word, but it turned into I love that guy. Yeah. We love talking about mezcal. We both align and we have so much in common. And so because I really was sincerely and earnestly sad that I couldn't get some of the Pulquero. And I understand that John got a bottle. Of course, John got a bottle. Houston got a bottle. Of course, Houston did. Francisco. Right. And I wanted that. And he was so thoughtful that he couldn't get one. He's like, I grabbed something for you from the Vago office.
Sure.
And so we're sipping on a Negro Blanco, or a Blanco Negro, which he'll have to correct me, but I believe it's a blend of Sierra Negra and some other kind of probably agave Americana, but the plants were planted by either Aquilino's grandfather or his father.
Wow.
So these are over 35 years old. And so you get...
Which is what we have now.
Yeah, this is what we're drinking now. And it is fucking insane.
It's awesome.
It's so cool.
It really is.
It's 50-something. I can't remember, but...
Yeah.
And this is a bottle that he was in town. He gave... We're at King B, and Suffice it to say,
Real vegetal smell.
Yeah, we all had a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a great friend of the community, and he and I are going to take a road trip so we can go interview Dressel.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, just a matter of time.
Yeah, he came in and did our mezcal training for the Backbeat group.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually, we had kind of done one already, which was fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess he had reached out to Jessica or whatever like that, and she brought him in, and it was much more thorough and very good. And you know, I had a lot of my opening people that were, when I say a lot, I mean, what, you got 5? I had 2 at least or whatever like that.
Yeah.
That just weren't big agave. They didn't know a lot about it yet. And
he'll turn you, man.
Yeah, and he at least, at the very least, got them to. I mean, listen, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Like,
yeah,
you can't,
right.
You know, shit on somebody for what they don't like, but they at least got the idea and respected it. And I think that there's a lot of you know, once you start hearing more and more of those conversations about the, you know, the history and the terroir and the families and all that kind of stuff, they do all this kind of stuff.
It's incredible, man. It's garage rock still. It's a demo tape. We just captured that perfect moment 100%. Of the time and place. You know,
100%.
So. But yeah, so it's good to share this one with you, and it's very special.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you
thoughtful
very much.
of Francisco.
Yeah, thanks, Francisco.
Yeah, for sure.
So now shifting the focus back to you.
Sure.
So 2011, you break up.
Mm-hmm.
When I met you, I would say 2012 or 13? Probably 13.
I think. Yeah,
Probably 13. You were single then?
When you and I met, yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
How long were you single before you met Lydia?
You know what's strange is we think about, and we're coming down to exactly the day, 3-year mark to the party at Drinkwell, right? And so single, and you know, I was
You met her after the party at Drinkwell?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but by like a matter of weeks. It was so strange.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So how I felt during that period, which was relative, I don't get lonely necessarily, but I was like, this would be a great time to share with somebody.
Sure.
It feels like
you're having the success.
Yeah.
Like if you were able to kind of share that pride, of course.
Right. And, you know, you don't go looking for it, and that's just not me. I don't, you know, I'm not going to go looking for it. But yeah, to think like as of June 26th, that's when I first met her. June 26th, 3 years ago.
And I feel like you told me this story one time or whatever, but tell me the story about when you met her or something like that, and she was playing a tape and it was your band?
Well, oh shit, that's a really strange piece of it. Well, you know, so here's like a brief preface to dating. In other words, if you want to swipe left and right to meet the love of your life, then you probably should take a different approach about being dedicated and committed to something, because that is such a passive approach. You could buy shoes through an app. Do you want to spend your life with someone who you treat like a pair of shoes, right? A series of features, whatever. Well, you don't want that. So anyway, so I saw her a couple times at work,
right?
And I chased her down. I had thought about it all weekend, and I was like, a Monday or Tuesday, I'm like, I've been thinking about this and thinking about this. I am going to just stop her. I don't know if she's married. I don't know if she has a boyfriend. I don't know shit about her. I just knew like the way she carried herself is that was something very, very appealing to me. And she's so beautiful, you know? So anyway, so I go in, and she looks like, has this kind of frozen look at me like, what do you want? In her office. And I was like, okay, I know you do something here at work. I don't know what it is, but whatever this conversation that is about to occur has nothing to do with work. This is about you and I, or me being selfish or whatever. So
you threw right into it.
I did. Oh yeah.
Just
I told her straight up.
And just like, I want to take you out. Or whatever.
That's right. Well, we didn't get that specific yet, but yeah, I was like, I want to get to know you.
Wow.
That was what I said. And I did, and we got married. But
but it wasn't that quick.
No,
it was like
you
wanted
like 2.5
Listen, you're
years.
not Steve and Anya. Like, you took some time.
No, yeah. I know that story. We definitely took some time. But the weirdest thing, and I thought she was fucking with me this whole time. She was listening to Pandora at the time, and her friend Sarah, I believe this is how it goes. She's like, "Hey, Lydia, check out this band," and she's listened to this band, and she knew I liked music and really into it. And we've always I said, "Hey, check this out, making mixtapes, all that stuff." She's like, "Hey, check out this band." I'm like, "Okay, I'll check them out." She goes, "They're called Love at 20." I'm like, if you look at the poster to your left, mind you, that is we're playing with Speak. That was our first show ever. But I was like, yeah, I know that band. Thanks for ha ha ha. You're fucking with me. She's like, no, they're really good. You should check it out.
And she had no idea it was you.
No idea.
Wow.
I'm like, Lydia, but the thing was, the suspense was beautiful because she didn't tell me who it was. She's like, come into my office and check out this band. And then I thought I was just being like the ultimate ruse on me, and we're listening, and I was like, that's me. She's like, what?
Yeah.
I go, no, that's me. I'm singing.
Right.
No. I'm like, yeah. And she just has this like stone cold, like a ghost came over her kind of look.
Have you gone back and found out from her later, like, did she fall then, you think?
Oh, I don't know, man. It was pretty, I think that first week we were hanging out and she made me a salad for lunch and brought it from home and stuff. Like, stuff was definitely up, you know?
Wow.
It was different than anything I've ever experienced.
Do you guys still work together now?
We do, yeah.
Oh, so
yeah,
you,
we eat
you,
breakfast.
you dipped in the company ink.
Yeah, different building at least. So
Good. Good.
Yeah, we would eat breakfast. We still pretty much most of the time eat lunch together every day.
So then you started dating after that. It's very interesting because I've seen, I've known you guys through, obviously, when your relationship started. The first time I met her, she spit gum at me.
I hear about this. I didn't see it.
It was at Blackheart. She lost her shit. If you can imagine somebody getting so frustrated.
I think I got in trouble that night for what? I don't know. But
we were all. I don't even know what we were all doing.
Yeah, it was my birthday, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was when we were drinking the Pappy Old Fashions over at Half Step. Sure. But yeah, we go over to Blackheart.
Yeah.
I had just met her, got to know her. I was probably antagonizing her because that's what I do sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Whatever like that. And then she launched her gum at me. And I like at the time I was so surprised that it happened. I just like, it was almost like it didn't happen.
Right.
I was like, all right, Mike, I'll see you later, buddy. You're whatever. And then like a couple of days later, I saw her. She's like, I am so sorry. And I was like, you know what? Honestly, I didn't even really think about it.
It's one of those nights for sure.
But it's funny because so that being said, she's a chili pepper.
Yeah.
She's got some spunk to her.
Yeah, she does.
And
for sure.
you are very even keel from what I kind of know. Like, how does that balance out? Because she's,
again, like
she's got fire.
Right. And once we realized, and I'm not a huge astrology person because I don't want to ever be painted into a corner.
And now you're just saying she's a fire sign.
Well, no, but it just like if you just step away from it and say like, just conceptually, what are we? She's fire, I'm air, right? Mm-hmm. So I have the amazing talent to do two things. One, enrage the shit out of her because I can just feed into that.
Sure.
Or at the same time, put out what is some of this, if you talk about fire or like passion or whatever. So it's a really good balance in that sense. I always feel like I come across as disaffected and somewhat lackadaisical at times. But I'm very, I'm very methodical and I'm always I'm thinking about stuff all the time. And she just feels it. She is, the reason that I love her so much is because she is exactly who she is. She is not pretend. She's not hiding. Sure. She knows who she is, and she just feels it. It's out there. And I think that that's a lovely thing because I've never experienced that.
Well, and people have to make sure, a lot of times fire is passion.
Right.
And it's it can be very genuine in times because I know for me personally, like, so we had this thing, when she spits at me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then as we got to know, like, she's one of the people that I feel like when I see her, she's genuinely happy that I'm there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like she's giving me shit. Like, it's so happy to see. Like, she doesn't do that. Like, she gives me a hug. It feels like a good hug. Like, I know that she's there and all that kind of stuff. And it's there.
Anything.
Yes, it's not.
She just
like,
is.
Well, and also, like, her not being in the industry the way that we are, just absolutely no reason to blow smoke up my ass.
For sure. Yeah.
So,
we're all just people, because it's like, you and I have a kind of a business relationship, but at the end of the day, if I didn't do the distillery stuff, I don't care. Like, we're still going to hang and still talk, it's been a good go and getting to know you and all that. So,
So here you are, you're going, forward, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I always feel like you've been listening to the show and you have some of my transitional mechanisms to get me going through this conversation.
I think not to say that I didn't say, listen, anything worth doing is worth doing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You've mentioned before that you have no intention on having kids.
Yeah, not into it.
She was on board with that too?
Totally.
Yeah.
We're totally aligned, thank God.
Why?
Why are we aligned, or why? No, is she feel that way?
Why do you not want to have them?
I feel so. Here's
and sub question: how do your parents feel about that?
Oh, my parents don't care. They're cool.
Really?
With whatever. Yeah. I mean, both of them are turning 70 this year. I'm going to be 37 sometime next year, and that's not a big concern to them. Our relationship between my mom and I, my dad and I, is better than it's ever been. So that's actually really, I think, what this phase is, or what this chapter is. But like with regard to kids, this is brilliant because there's a guy, Matthew, who is a new dad, and he sits next to me at work, and we talk about this because I want to, like, I got to have a sounding board. I got to ask some dad's questions. And we're so alike. He's a Brit. We go out and drink, and he loves mezcal. Fast friends,
Sure.
And I asked him the other day, I said, do you love your kid? And he's like, I don't know yet, man.
Yeah.
It causes him so much inconvenience. And I said, there's a break-even point at which after that point, it's all dandy. And he's like, yeah, probably. But my wife and I are like, we hate the bugger right now, but it grows to love. But the thing I said is, and they were very calculated about it, and he's still ambitious. I don't suspect this is somehow a supplement for him being doing his own ventures or anything like that.
Sure.
I really do feel that for a lot of people, when they're too, and I don't care how much shit I get about this, but when they're too afraid to step into their own business, which is a terrifying thing.
Sure.
You're on the hook for money. You're on the hook for people's time. All of this perception. I think that when their ambitions run dry or they're too afraid to take that next step, the perfect segue.
Sure.
The perfect palate cleanser is having a kid to carry on those steps you weren't willing to do yourself. Now, my parents,
which is
never
crazy
been like that,
because it's like that's a very naive way to look at that because it's such a fucking commitment.
I know. No, true. But at the end of the day, it's like it's a private commitment. If you go run a business, you have customers. They publicize and they socialize your failures or your strengths. So in a way, it's a real safe way of failing or succeeding.
Right.
Now, and again, like, I don't care if people have kids. Obviously, it works out well, and I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't if our parents hadn't had kids. But to me, it's not a solution. It should be a value add to an already very established and strong foundation emotionally with your partner and with your career. And at least for right now. Now, I'm not saying it's off the table forever. That would be naive to say that I can understand the future before it happens. But right now, Lydia and I are locked about it.
Good.
And I've got a lot of stuff to do, and I already have a kid. I've got Genius as a kid. The Sotol is a kid.
The analogy, people talk to me about that plenty of times, and I'm like, I got two kids, and they're like, how old are they? I'm like, no. I got a 4-year-old on North Loop.
That's right.
And I got a newborn down on South Lamar right now.
Own personalities, their own
personalities, and then all the stats that's involved.
Yeah.
I hate the analogy like Becca calls us mom and dad, and like that kind of irks me a little bit because I don't want it to feel like that dominating mom and dad kind of thing.
Right.
But in a way also, like we definitely need to, we're working to nurture them and working to help them on in their careers and all that kind of stuff. So there is a sort of parental kind of thing that goes in that. But
for sure. It is. I think it's an apt analogy. And if you own a business and you are pouring your money, your time, and losing sleep over it, then it is a very, very concrete analogy.
It takes so much out of yourself.
Absolutely.
The life that you had before now is completely different because you've had to give up so much.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick, right? So I remember and it's so strange because my relationship with Lydia was stronger than it ever has been, even though every day it's better than it was the day before. But I remember running into you like at Small Victory when they were having their soft opening, and that was the lowest point for me.
You were in a bad place that day.
Yeah, and
I remember that specifically.
Lost bunches of money, lost the thing that I loved to do with the Sotol because people are always worse than you think they're going to be, and they're not professional, and you can't deal with people like you and I can work on the same level and understand.
And if you don't mind me asking,
sure.
What people?
So this particular person who was our supplier for the Sotol, and Billy knows who he was because he caused a big huff and puff at King B one time, and Billy actually texted me and said, "What is up with this dude?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Oh wow.
Here's a real quick business lesson, and I talked to Carlos Camarena about this just the other week. He was in town. I got to interview him, and we were talking about. I said, "Hey, Carlos, it's not normal for someone that gives you plants, so in his case, agave, my case, Sotol, it's not normal for them to ask for equity in your company, is it?" And he's like, "Fuck no." He goes, I pay these guys on a lease, so I either pay them rent or I pay them a share of what we harvest, but that's it. And so that's ultimately what it came down to. Someone who was giving me, as Justin Elliott puts it, giving me the trees for my paper, wanted to own part of my paper company.
Right.
And that was devastating.
And how did he kick up a fuss at King B?
Oh, because they have the sotol there.
Right.
And he's like, I did this and this and I didn't get anything and blah, blah, blah. He had such a bad... He saw the money like sharks. He smelled the blood in the water and he just...
Because you intended on this atoll to be an ongoing, like you were going to make more,
for sure.
I think, and do an ongoing relationship. And I mean, it's extremely limited release. There was 2.
Yeah.
You know, I tasted one in a vial, and the other in. I have a bottle of the second one. I know Billy has 2 of them, but that's it. I know that wasn't the intention. So
it's coming back, and we're out there exploring and pioneering and looking. Now,
you just said you're having another trip out there.
Yeah, not to the same area, although we'll look, but. We went out. This is just to briefly illustrate. Like 3 of us, Mark, Matthew, the Brit, and I went out. Mm-hmm. We went to Bernie, Texas, knowing not where to go. We just pulled on the side of the road and said, I think there's a bunch of plants over there. And we went hiking. And it was a great experience. We're like the first to do it. No one gave a shit about this land.
Sure.
No one knows what sotol is. Mm-hmm. And it was just beautiful to see these ripe, mature plants. And I started to get it again. Right, it's like, oh, I remember why I love this record so much, and it takes you back to a time and place. So it's coming back, and I've got some better understanding of the structuring of how I'd work with the landowner. Thank you to Mr. Camarena for some insight there. So,
but back to low point, small victory.
Oh yeah, well that was it, man. You know, it's like the band broke up.
Right.
It's like, well, fuck, I love this thing. We're the only ones to do this thing. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. I love the flavor of it. I love the experience. It is the most musical way you can distill in a pot still. Distilling agave and blending the puntas, and this is actually probably perfect for the last tasting, but blending the puntas, the hearts, and then the colas, blending those together and understanding their characters like mixing a song. And so when you taste a mezcal, you are hearing someone's perspective on tone and their perspective on melody. Right? That is what it is. Now, it's not the same thing when you make gin because gin's got to be consistent. It can't be different.
Sure.
Can't be rugged.
Sure.
But you taste this stuff like we have right now from Acalino or some of the other stuff from Tio Ray earlier. This speaks to the men themselves. And I lost that outlet. Right? Because gin, once I understand the process and I've got it all delineated and I can hand it off to our distiller, Mark, like it's done. I don't have to be engaged. I'm engaged in a different way then. You know? And it was just heartbreaking. And all the money too, you know?
But I remember, and unfortunately, you and I had talked about meeting up after that, and it didn't happen for whatever unfortunate reasons. But I want to talk a little bit about your emotion on that day because I want to tell you what you were there, and I feel like we were standing by a table, and it was you and I think Rashid and Marjorie were there. Yeah. And I don't know if it was the time that you recorded that or whatever like that, but I want you to give me a little bit of an insight on your emotion at that time because when I talked to you, you were literally like I think on the verge of tears.
Yeah,
you were welling up. You were choked up. Mm-hmm. And I asked you about it, and you felt not depressed at that time. You expressed it to me as being overwhelmed.
Yeah,
you were overwhelmed by a wave of emotion. Mm-hmm. That I think that you had maybe you had one of these sessions before that you really got to talk to somebody. They took it over. You felt this sort of swell of love.
Yeah.
I think either because of the people that you were directly surrounded about.
Yeah, it was Michael Phillips and Sheed, I think, back there.
Right.
Yeah.
Being around that atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. Now you're telling me about this other thing that I didn't necessarily know about.
Right.
I feel like when I had talked to you or whatever like that, it sort of seemed like this groundswell of emotion that you were getting there. So kind of tell me what all was going on in your head that day. Because I think you and I had a text conversation a day or so later that it wasn't any better. It was still, you were still in a little bit of a darkness. Yeah. Because I think you even wrote to me and was like, hey man, sorry I was in it, whatever. And I was like, no, I'm totally here for you and all that kind of stuff. And was still in deal. So kind of what was all going on there in that situation?
It's kind of multifaceted. There's, when you pour money into something and you make the assumption that you can make some of that money back and like you're working with credit and stuff, obviously that's a very undue amount of pressure. And pressure is the best word for it. Like, you got to do this stuff. It's like, this money's due, blah, blah, blah. So all that was happening. And we invested, money into this atoll, and then we had to sever the relationship. It's basically like losing all your money in a stock that you thought was going to rise. So there's like that at play. But at the same time, there was, to contrast it, this amazing sense of acceptance, openness, and empathy that I had for Sheed, because we talked for quite a while in here, and it was a beautiful experience for me. Same thing with Michael Phillips, talking about the death of his father, Sheed talking about the death of his sister. And we shared these real moments that I don't often get to share with people. Mm-hmm. We operate in this industry on a very topical and superficial level most of the time because it is so transactional. Is it really appropriate on a Friday night when you guys are three deep to go into the emotional makeup of someone's existence and their being? No, it's not. But if we can come in here and we can just break it down and talk bare bones, then you expose yourself. You become vulnerable, which is something I don't have a problem doing. But I think that maybe a lot of the people in the industry don't get that opportunity to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. They don't feel like they'll feel like they'll be judged, or they'll feel like something bad will come of it. Whereas like right here in this room right now, as I'm talking to you, this serves as an open, non-judgmental place where we can just be ourselves and talk about the things we fear, the things we love, and how we do feel vulnerable at times. Mm-hmm. And so that's what that was, right? I've shared these moments with both of those guys, and I'm like, they're lovely people, and mm-hmm. I would have never known otherwise. Mm-hmm. And they can see through me, right? I knew I wasn't hiding anything. I knew that people could see who I was, despite what kind of face or solemn kind of facade I have. Mm-hmm. They knew, and I knew them, and they knew that I knew them. And there's something very, very satisfying and kind of like ultimately wonderful about not having to put your guard up with people.
Of course.
And so that's what it was. You basically get like no filter at that point. And so it was a really tough time, and Lydia makes fun of me for how drunk I came back that night, but she will take care of me, and it's much better now. But having the podcast, which I thought would be nothing except a method of chronicling people's lives and chronicling this particular era in the industry, besides that, I didn't have any expectation. But what I've managed to share with people in terms of conversations and what they've learned about each other via me or just via the technology, dude, it's insane feeling.
No, it's become a fantastic therapy session, because I remember when you asked me about it first and we were talking about it, mm-hmm. and you were like, I want to do this podcast, I want to talk to people in the industry and all that kind of stuff, and especially kind of going in. And I remember I had a conversation later with Hank Cathy, because he was talking about like the expectations of doing it and all that kind of stuff. And when you first had pitched it to me, I told you, I was like, listen, dude, I can talk no matter what, but if you want to talk about botanical structures and shit like that, you got the wrong standards for that. Yeah, there's another one that Jessica can handle that shit. Like she's much better at that stuff than I am.
Yeah.
But it ended up being so much more and so great. And I talk a lot of times to people about the unfortunate situation of this industry, mm-hmm. of the way that it's affected lives, and depression, and you're always on. Oh, you're always, people are dying, people are having
we haven't
serious
even seen the
problems.
Beginning of it.
Yeah. It's all happening. And unfortunately, the way that just the world works right now in the healthcare, we don't have healthcare, most of us.
Yeah.
So our healthcare ends up being the situation of going and sitting at the end of a night, smoking a pack of cigarettes, drinking Fernet, and just venting about shit.
Right.
So this has been a very deep, and it doesn't go negative, it goes dark at times because people's lives go that way.
Sure.
Just a great therapy session to be able to have, and a therapeutic thing for you as being the interviewer. Like now that I've been in this chair, like I'm sort of, I totally get it. And you get to know people because, question for you, did you have friends that would be that vulnerable to you on their own, off mic or whatever like that, before you started doing this? Did you have people that would really share in that depth to you otherwise? And that you felt comfortable doing that too?
I haven't shared this with a lot of people. My mom has this amazing ability to get you just to like say anything and everything by doing nothing. She's just so disarming, and she's so easy to talk to, and she's not judgmental. She's seen it all, and I hope that that's kind of what I can bring in terms of a lens to this perspective as to this conversation. But I noticed years ago when I had this girlfriend, and she casually felt like opening up to me, which is good. It wasn't a serious thing. It was only a couple months that we were dating.
Post-marriage, pre-Lydia?
No, pre-marriage. So
Pre-marriage,
this is like
okay.
the mid-2000s.
Okay.
And she opened up about a series of abuse. Mm-hmm. She had been raped. I don't think a lot of people know that. And I started to share these moments with people where they were kind of really, really opening up, and okay, we're all people. Shit happens, and that's not the only time that's been like that. One of the guests on the show as well, she expressed off mic when we were done, and she dived into it a little bit in the conversation, but she said, this stuff happened. My mom knew I'd been abused for you. You know what I mean? Like, this gets tough sometimes, but I feel like in a way, and I'm not important. I'm just a guy just doing this thing I really enjoy doing, but people share some stuff. And I guess to get back to the question, it didn't even have to be friends.
Right. People were open to
it was
you
just people
regardless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I maybe didn't know them all that well. And some people here I've built great friendships with, and others we had just this amazing exchange in an hour or an hour and a half, and then we went on our way. But I hope that they're forever changed, and the way that I am. So I don't know. It was all kind of building up, man. Like, I didn't go into psychology or psychiatry to practice, and thus I did other stuff. But this is really a way I hope for people to just share.
Well, it's a great way that it's evolved. I mean, and everybody, and I think that what is good about it is because it's not strictly about booze, and it's not formulaic.
Yeah.
There are people. I mean, I know a good bit of people on here. I know sometimes when people are bullshitting, and sometimes people are on, and even myself. Like, I don't think I tend not to bullshit, but still. But regardless of that, you can see people being themselves. You can see people doing their own thing, and everything is different. If it was sort of like that, I mean, you do like inside the actor's studio and whatever like that, and then you get to like these set questions. Sure, there's a flair or whatever like that, but every single conversation that you've had on here really goes in a completely different direction.
And I can assure you, and I can assure anybody that listens to it, I don't ever want it to be scripted.
Sure.
I want it to be of the moment, and I am genuinely interested in everybody that comes in here, and I want to know as much as I can about who they are, and that's how it goes,
Yeah.
And I've only had, oddly enough, so speaking of another interview that we've mentioned, or you and I have talked about, that I couldn't release, this person actually later reached out and said, hey, I know I was being really closed off, can we do it again?
Oh, good.
So we're going to do it again and get to talk about what somebody might be thinking coming in here about some fucking dude just asking them random questions.
Sure.
And how closed off maybe they feel like being, so.
Sure.
Yeah, that's good.
Do you want to go to this puntas as we kind of...
Yeah, you're going to have to ask him real strange questions for this motherfucker, because this is 70+%.
Well, I haven't gotten any yet. Did you?
No, I didn't
drinking
get
the last
any
one?
yet. Yeah, it's the last
one. Oh, no, this is...
it.
Yeah, I brought this back for you. I mean, like I said, puntas are great. There's a lot of good situations. This one, for respect to the producer, we won't tell who gave it, and obviously does amazing stuff. This is paint thinner. This is a dick measuring situation. This is not something that I'm gonna sit by the fire, but I want and drink.
You have any opposition to me adding? Because so these are the puntas of the Karwinski. So by Quisher, it doesn't actually say it's copper, and it's probably refrescadera. So it's a interesting kind of It's probably a single distillation.
It's definitely got its character.
Single distillation, all the way up to...
It's serious business. What, 78%?
78. That's incredible. But in a single distillation, so the third producer for Vago use the same kind of still. So let's do this. I'm probably going to add water because I don't want to drink it at 78. Jeez. That's
You should
insane.
dip a tongue in at least.
Yeah. All right. I will. Puntas, man.
So now, okay, so you're making.
How do you wrap this up, Mike?
Well, no, but you're so what have we gone through? So music.
Yep.
Well, here's a good way to do it. So we've talked about music, we've talked about booze, we've talked about relationships.
Yeah.
We've talked about community.
Yep.
All of those things I think are very inherent elements of what people consider Austin to be.
Yeah, sure.
Austin had a music deal. Austin has a booze culture, obviously, and then there's obviously a community that we are a part of one way or another. How do you think it's going? What do you say? Where do you think it's going?
In Austin specifically?
Yeah, and Austin, like, where do you think Austin as a town, if you want to keep those facets in there, is going? Yeah. Right? It's there's some hair on that mezcal.
God, that's so crazy though. So minty. That's so cool. Wow, you guys need to try these puntas. You don't get a chance often to taste them like that. So I want to preface with one thing, and that is xenophobia is a really dangerous thing.
Oh God.
So
yeah.
Don't Dallas my Austin. Just fuck off, right? So
right.
I've been here since 2000. You've been in and out. You went to school here in the 90s, and then you came back. And I find it highly suspicious that the people besides, and I love Vice in a lot of respects and hate it in a lot of other respects because it's basically TMZ with hipsters, right? And I was a hipster, and maybe I still am. But anyways, that aside, the biggest voices, the loudest voices of people like, don't come to Austin. They're the people who've lived here like less than 3 years.
Oh, they're all transplants.
Yeah. They have absolutely
it's like
no,
when I lived in New York
on.
City. All these people are talking about, I met one person in 10 years that was raised in New York City.
That's right. Yeah.
At the very least, they're from Long Island.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's, dude, that's a really dangerous behavior.
Of course it is.
Reclaiming an ideology that you all of a sudden identify with, even though you have been here less than 3 years, typically.
Sure.
And why are you the token spokesperson for Austin? Fuck off, seriously. And don't pretend like you understand Austin. My friend the other day, she says, yeah, I went to this, and Lauren. But I found it a very good point. But Lauren's been here a while, right?
Right.
And she's like, oh, I went to Tucson. It felt like Austin in the early 2000s. I'm like, you weren't here in the early 2000s. She's like, well, what I thought it would be. I'm like, okay. She's a great friend, but I was like, you don't know it,
If you don't mind me adding a little anecdote that's really fascinating. So a really good friend of mine, who's a Mexican guy, very big on the concerns with immigration, and all this kind of stuff. Years ago, when they started having the situation going on in Arizona, that the governor was doing all this profiling, and stuff like that, and it was like, speak English, be American, all this kind of stuff, all this real xenophobia kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he was posting a lot of stuff on Facebook and would tell me personally.
Fire Dan Patrick, by the way.
Yeah.
Just as an aside.
And all of that.
That fucker, yeah.
But he also made a comment one day, and I called him out directly on it. He made a comment, and he was like, if you're going to move to Austin, at least learn our language and do what we do and speak our ways and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you realize you basically said exactly what the governor of Arizona just said about your people and your deal. Like, come on, dude. Like, let's all, work together. And he was like, oh, man, I didn't even think about it like that. And I'm like, because you don't.
Yeah.
Because you don't think about it
It's a very dangerous... Politics don't particularly interest me. They only interest me in the sense that it's like a lab experiment of which the results I would have never been able to predict because people are acting so foolish and so ignorantly that I find it comical, even though they'd rather strangle each other than shake hands, right? So it's like a very strange, tense place with the political climate right now and all of that. But that aside, so take the people that reclaim or claim Austin as their home, albeit been here less than 3 years. So take them off the table for a second. So, all right, that's fine. So we're left with us, you and I, right? We both own businesses. We both deal in the booze industry, which for you is a massively growing category, and for me as well is a very big growing category. For example, the gins in 2013, there were a total of 4 labels. Now there are 42 as a 10 times multiplier. So yeah, we got some growth for sure. And that's good because tech has embraced Austin. You've got Amazon, PayPal, Facebook, Google, really good, profitable companies coming into Austin to provide jobs. Like, that's a good thing. And I don't care if people from California come. I don't care if people from Dallas come. We will grow no matter what. And we will evolve. And if you don't like change, then you are no better than a man in his late 50s that still reminisces about Donna Reed and the woman staying in the kitchen.
Right.
It's a dangerous way to think about people, and it's a dangerous way to think about a city, and somehow you want to that those are the parameters of which you operate. That's a very dangerous line of thinking. So keep it simple. Will drinks be better? Fuck yeah. Someone's going to raise the bar, and then everybody's going to have to raise the bar. I think that's brilliant. Is the food going to be better? Absolutely. And then all of the food will be better. Will the spirits be better? Probably not, because people want to treat it as a cash grab. But everything will grow, and we're going to have to deal with it. But yeah, there you go.
There we are. It seems like we're sort of winding down.
Yeah. Any other? Yeah, I always, because I try not to ask challenging questions, but you have, it's pretty good.
Yeah. I feel like if you thought I wasn't going to challenge you, you're crazy.
No, I mean, you didn't challenge me.
No. I appreciate this. I thank you very much for allowing me to be able to, ask you these questions and stuff like that. How did it feel being on the other side?
It's cool, man. It's really the same.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and I think absolutely flattering that I've had multiple people ask. They're like, oh, but you're asking all the questions. Let me ask the questions. Like,
right.
Okay. And to think that since October, this is probably like 101 actually with the Bar Institute stuff, all those interviews. Like fucking 100 interviews since October. Sure. It's insane, dude. Mm-hmm. And I got Dale DeGroff on the target. He's like the ultimate. I think Jimmy Russell will, I don't think I'll be able to get a good chat in with him before things expire, but no bounds.
Do you have a whale you're going for?
Dale DeGroff, yeah.
But you've already set it up.
Dale? No.
I thought you alluded to you had already set it up.
No,
Dale was your whale.
Yeah,
Dale the whale.
That's right. It's in the pipeline. And Tomas, that
everybody
was amazing.
Tweet hashtag Dale the whale that we want to make sure that
Dale
he gets on
is
here.
the whale for sure. And like, I mean, he just reminds me of Harvey Keitel and those guys from the old school New York school. And he was an actor, and I feel like we could just talk about movies more than anything else, Sure. But Tomas, we can, if you want to end on this, Tomas, we have to do it in chapters because it was so incredible talking to him. We just talked about mankind.
He has so much information. He has so much insight to give. I've had conversations with him, and
he's so compassionate. Mm-hmm. So that one's coming out shortly, and obviously Carlos Cameron and David Suro was an amazing. Judah he can't escape for long before we get that. So, but yeah, dude, thanks for switching.
Yes.
As I was thinking about it, the hunter has become the hunted.
Awesome. Good. Well, thank you so much, Mike. Yeah, we all appreciate very much what you're doing with the community and stuff like that. Like I said, I think everybody would agree it's a fabulous sort of therapy session to be able to talk about stuff with somebody like you that listens, because so many of us, myself included, just wait for their next time to talk. So
I love it, Mike. Thanks so much, dude.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, there we have it, everybody. The wonderful Michael Sanders taking some time out to chat with me, to drill me about life, and as I've done with so many other people before, it was a really great experience, Mike, sitting down and talking and sharing, as so many of you wonderful guests have done with me. I have to say, I never expected 100 fucking episodes. I mean, this is insane. This is so many hours of amazing conversation, so many great experiences. I've shared so many brilliant sips and tips with people, and I feel so humbled by it, and I really am lucky, and I thank everybody for their support, their openness to talk with me, and their transparency. It is a brilliant period in history with regard to hospitality, with regard to technology, with regard to booze. And it's great to expose it and explore all the amazing personalities there are in this lovely, lovely industry. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate the support. And 100 episodes is insane. And what we'll do with 200 episodes, I have no idea, but I assure you it will be great and the journey will be worth every moment. So please stay tuned and keep on listening. So thanks again, everybody, for listening to the 100th episode of Show De Vie with Mike G. No matter how you're thinking about how Michael Sanders did as an interviewer, and I kind of think he did a great job, or what kind of wine you need a glass of after reminiscing, please keep dancing.